It's the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. I'm Laurie Rivers with you, here to bring you some inspiration to get those aspirations out in the world. Grab your coffee, your tea, your iced whatever. Get your hot cocoa if you're down under. It's going to be a weird week. In fact, it is going to be quantumly weird as Mars meets up with Jupiter on the 13th, 14th, depending on where you are in the world. And since 77 countries tune into this podcast, I can't believe that. How cool is that? All of the continents on the globe that have tune-ins, except Antarctica, although, who knows, some penguins might be listening. It is a strange week, and it will be an overstimulating week for many. I give you some tips and hints on how to ride the cosmic wave this week, and I'm even giving you a heads up about that big old full moon on August 19th, because that is a Monday, and the podcast drops on Mondays, and I want you to be well aware of what's up on deck with that full moon ahead of time. We are discussing that as well as answering questions submitted by patrons. And let's see, what else am I doing? Oh, I'm giving you what's going to happen this week with my handy dandy predictions of what will be in the headlines, courtesy of patrons of the Awake Space from the Awake Space Astrology magazine, which you can find at the Patreon, linked into the show notes. Which, if you don't want to have a subscription, I completely understand that. It's available in the shop. You might want to use your computer for that and not your cell phone if you've got an iPhone, because the iOS surcharge is included in the price, and that just ups it. But yeah, it is quantumly weird. Do you guys know what quantum weirdness is? It's an interesting concept. And it's really interesting. If you Google it, it says it defies human intuition. And I disagree with that. I don't think it defies human intuition. I think it defies human intellect. Never allow scientists into the spiritual realm without them having deconstructed their thoughts. They keep forgetting about confirmation bias. I love science. It's that's the stuff I read and watch for fun. Okay. But they keep using these words, and to quote Inigo Montoya, they keep using that word. I don't think it means what they think it means. I don't think quantum mechanics and quantum weirdness defies human intuition at all. I think it describes human intuition, because sometimes intuition doesn't make sense, right? That's what I keep trying to teach everybody. I keep trying to teach you that sometimes you just have to go with that light impulse, not the impulse that says, spend all your money. That's never good guidance. Our intuition never says that. That might be a different kind of energy we're tuning into. But sometimes, when we decide to change lanes for no reason and we end up being in just the right lane we need to be in during a slow down, or maybe there's an accident up ahead, or when we decide to go get a cup of coffee at not a regular time and we then decide to go to a store after that, we're just kind of following our whimsy and we end up finding something that's exciting for us, or it gets us into a new groove, or we lighten our mood and then we see an opportunity. Or in my case, while I was waiting for other tracks to process here, because I had finished recording the podcast, I decided to kind of scroll through my Google feed, and I came across a Conan O'Brien podcast episode that had Jack Black. And Jack Black's kind of funny, and I thought, well, I'll watch a funny video while I'm waiting for this stuff to process. And the subject of quantum weirdness came up as Conan and Jack Black were having a laugh. And I went, wait a minute. That is the perfect title for this week's episode. And I got really excited. That's what I'm talking about. So quantum weirdness is that thing that things just don't explain themselves in a logical, linear fashion. And I think as science moves along during the Pluto and Aquarius era, we're going to find out that there's a lot more weird than not. and that all of our neat and tidy bows and explanations were perhaps filled with hubris. Now, I'm not saying that up will be down and down will be up, but when it comes to the quantum, things can be a little interesting. And so shall this week be. I think we're going to see some weird news. I think there's going to be some big headlines this week, some bombshell headlines. And I go through that later in the podcast. We've got a lot of patron shout outs. We have grown exponentially. I'm not even going to edit that part out. It is flooring me. We have over 1,700 patrons supporting this podcast. I am absolutely flabbergasted and honored. Thank you so much. I haven't checked the charts in a while because, I just kind of don't. But why don't I take a look? Let's see. Matilda's better about that than I am. Let's see. Did we drop out? Oh, we may have dropped out of the top 10. Oh, we did. But we're number 14 this week as I record this. Let's push us up a little bit. And I find that, again, very interesting because we've had record downloads on the podcast. Not just listens, but record downloads. So, again, I think we're making people pay a little more in their advertising dollars. Last week's didn't get as many as before, but we're still way over our normal listens. It's just wild, I tell you. Wild. All right. So we've got a lot of quantum weirdness. People might be feeling a little overstimulated. I give you tips and hints on how to deal with that. We talk a little bit at the end of the podcast when I'm answering some questions about the ethics of teaching about mental health markers or trauma markers in astrology. And kind of, are they different? Are they not? And I explained that, so people might find that interesting. When it comes to politics, world events, even seismic activity, this week could be a little interesting, especially as we move towards that Mars-Jupiter conjunction. Also with the moon in Scorpio, it's going to be a little rocky. So I want you to hold on to your hats. We got more storms brewing. Climate change is evident. It's going to continue to be wild and wacky when it comes to our weather patterns and what's going on in the world. And yet we can personally navigate these times. We can even find opportunities in this time, even if it's a lot crunchy. All right. So we're going to take some deep breaths together as we go through the episode and find some ways to soothe ourselves, even though things might be a little bumpy. Let's get on with the show. And whether we're driving to work or we're folding clothes or taking a hot girl walk or a hot guy walk, going to the dog park, going to the gym, I do so many things with all of you. I'm a very active gal. So whatever we're doing, let's do it together. And I'm honored that you're doing that with me. Let's get on with the show. Not gonna lie, the next couple of months are kind of a shit show, but each one is kind of special. So we have the Mars-Jupiter conjunction happening on the 13th/14th. And this is some big bada boom energy. Mars, it's the planet of action, aggression. Jupiter is the great magnifier. And so it is, things will be larger than life. There are going to be some big bada booms. And on the lists of things that make Laurie nervous, that power plant in Ukraine that starts with a Z and I cannot pronounce, so I'm not even going to try, is on fire. God. I've had my eye on that. the whole time, because we have some signatures that equate to radiation. And, we've had a lot of solar storms. We've had a lot of things going on. And one of the fun things that's happening with the Mars-Jupiter conjunction is Saturn is square it. So yeah, in Pisces that rules radiation, and Gemini, things that fly in the air, and Mars and Jupiter together, making them for some big booms. So I've thought for a long time it's got to be leaking, just because of how it's been mishandled and how the international community has been concerned about it, and the astrological signatures. If you've been a patron for any length of time, then you will note I've had issues with power plants and radiation and things for quite a long time. It's not always reported on. So we'll find out about stuff 6 months later in that, when I've got it in a prediction. I'll be like, hey, I predicted that. So there's that. Other things I think might happen on a mundane level. Remember, we can't really go the most positive route when we're looking at mundane astrology. There's no agency. We're going to go lowest common denominator. Sometimes we get lucky and we miss those worst case scenarios, which is why I urge people to hold their consciousness steady, because the more of us who can hold our consciousness steady, we impact the direction of things. So it doesn't mean think positive thoughts only. It just means, be less reactive, which is going to be hard this week. Okay. If you've been overstimulated, if you felt like you were going crazy, that's probably Mars-Jupiter conjunction. I'll talk about what that means later on in the podcast on a personal level. But on the mundane level, I think we could see more helicopter crashes. There was one in Australia. The plane accident in Brazil. I think we'll see more stuff like that. We could see missiles go astray. We could see drones, fail their mission or operation. There could be a whole bunch of stuff. On the positive side of Saturn squaring off with Mars, Jupiter, it's actually containing aggression a little bit. It's not as easy to take aggressive measures. So that's in our favor. We got that going for us. Ha 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 ha. So, other positives. This is not a great transit for Donald Trump. I'm particularly fond of that. It's sitting on his Uranus. And I think between the 13th and the 21st, maybe even into the 23rd of the month, he's probably not going to be liking life. He's spinning out. Just watch him spin out. So when it comes to Donald Trump, and when I'm speaking about his placements, I am literally only speaking about him. I don't care if you have similar placements to him. I'm not talking about you. It doesn't mean you're going through the same stuff. You don't wield your consciousness in the same way, I hope. But his Uranus is being pinged pretty hard by Mars and Jupiter. And I bet that's why he's not campaigning. I really do think Donald has an astrologer. I have some thoughts about who it might be. And because I know how various astrologers that lean politically that direction, how they interpret. And I'm not going to say they didn't do him any favors by having him not campaign for 3 weeks. He doesn't have great transits for that. But I think they're mistaken if they think September is going to be better for him. But that's just my personal experience and opinion. But yeah, I think you're going to watch him just melt. And I think he may have a health crisis as well. This could really exacerbate any mental health condition he has, which includes dementia. But if he's been having strokes, it's certainly not helping him out. And neither is that full moon coming up on the 19th. That is going to be something else. And normally I kind of wait till I talk about these things, but I want to get you guys well, good, and ready. I might talk more about Donald Trump next week. All of my predictions I've had about him since 2022, maybe even 2021, are in the Patreon. So you can just search him. If you can't find it under Trump, look under Orange Man, because I often refer to him as Orange Man. So there's that. So what else do I think can happen with this Mars-Jupiter conjunction? Big wind, big wind, these storms. And they're not necessarily like, notice how Debbie kind of cycled slowly, which always sucks. If you've ever been in a storm that isn't moving fast, it's its own kettle of fish, especially if there's a lot of precip. I remember once in Northwest Washington, we had a storm cycle over the top of us very slowly for a couple days, and just it dropped an immense amount of water. And God, I can't even remember what year it was, but we had like 1,000 lightning strikes an hour. It was just weird. It was not normal weather for where we lived. We were used to a good amount of rain, but the lightning strikes were crazy, and it was in August. It was quite weird. Might have been 2012, to be honest, which was the last time Jupiter was in Gemini, was back then. So 2012, 2013. And it was a wild year. How do I remember it was August? Because it was like when our local community fair was going to start, and I ran the hand spinning and fleece department. And it was like cleanup before the fair started. And we were worried about people getting hit by lightning. It was exciting. It might have been July. Because that's when we cleaned up before the fair started. But anyway, it's going to be intense. It's going to be really intense. We could see more accidents. I was actually quite glad there wasn't any terrorist attacks in Paris. That was something I had been concerned about. There was a lot of violence. It wasn't always reported. We got some stuff sneaking out. There definitely was issues with food poisoning. Not counting, E. coli in the River Seine, which I do not understand. I like to win, but I do not understand swimming in poop water. It's just like nothing is worth poop water. Okay. Nothing, not a gold medal, not my name in the history books, poop water. No, I'm just saying. What else is going on this week? It's a wild week, guys. We could see increases in public violence, and I'm looking at you in the United Kingdom, also in Eastern Europe. Okay, I think Ukraine moving into Russia was a bold move, but I think it may have repercussions. And this kind of lines up with when I was saying maybe Poland firing into Russia. It might have been, that may happen as well. That was something I talked about in our May event with Medium Matilda, when she was asking, was Poland going to get hit? Now, if Poland gets hit, it's because we're in Mercury retrograde. We've got the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini, and is being squared off with Saturn in Pisces. That's a great mix for dealing with missiles. But I felt that maybe it would be Poland or maybe Ukraine firing out of, just over the Polish border. And I haven't seen anything to that effect. I don't know that everything gets reported, but Ukraine moving into Russia, like literally into Russian territory, not just Russian claimed territory. That's right in line with that prediction as well. I felt like Russia wasn't going to have the ground. That doesn't mean they're not going to turn around and push harder. I think we'll see maybe some crisis with the EU, NATO, etc. this week. I think that's coming up, but I'll talk about more what I see in the headlines at the end of the podcast. So it's stabby. You could see that in Germany, the United Kingdom, France. France could see some pent up energy happen after the Olympics are over. People may have felt contained and need to go be French out in the streets. We could see the political situation kick back up. People probably feel a little suppressed by the Olympics. And then in the United States, I think we could see vehicular violence. I think we could see people literally using their car as a weapon. I think we might see a car bombing. I think that's more towards the DNC convention. It could happen over the weekend. It could mess up traffic. It could be during the event itself, which is on the full moon. It's going to be a bit of a mess. I think we could see weather. I think, again, weather kicking up. And these could be tornadoes, microbursts. Fires aren't going to be put out with this kind of energy. So we could see fires expand, new forest fires start, especially out in the west. Australia could see more polar winds, and there could be strange winds. There could be some violence, whether it's a terrorist attack or domestic terrorism or somebody goes bonkers. And we could see a lot of mental health instability happening. People who just have a very hard time wielding their consciousness deliberately. So very reactive people. Maybe even more so reactive. So if you see someone acting oddly or very aggressively, I would not confront them. I just wouldn't. And again, I'll talk about how to deal with this energy as somebody, being impacted by it. We all are. We're all feeling a little bit overstimulated right now. So I'll be talking about that coming up. It's a wild and woolly time on the planet. It is not the worst time we have lived through. It will not be the only time we live through these types of things as a collective, as humanity. We might see communication disruptions, internet disruptions, communications devices being mishandled, more hacking events, lots of fibbing and the uncovering of fibs and lies and information leaks. We could see information leaks. So if you're one of the many people in the intelligence community globally listening to this podcast, which is my running joke, it's a joke. I just wonder every once in a while when I see of the 76 countries that tune into this podcast will get one listener. I'm like, okay, you're either a really big fan related to me in some way, or you might be like, she's good at this. I think I'm going to take notes. I don't know. We'll find out. Don't tell me if you are. I don't want to know. I'm on the side of the good guy. And who's that? Well, certainly not many governments. It's just not my deal. Now, the solar storms, the Aurora Borealis, are kicking it up, and we are getting some gorgeous pictures in the Awake Space Lounge in the Patreon chat at the Awake Space Patreon. People are taking pictures of those beautiful northern lights. Gorgeous. I got a very fuzzy picture of the moon tonight. Gotta remember I'm blind, and even though the iPhone takes great pictures, I'm not necessarily good at it. But the moon was just this blood red crescent. Absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And I caught it just as it was starting to set. There's a lot of smoke in the atmosphere here. So it's making that moon just be really bloody red and gorgeous. The one thing about air pollution is it makes for pretty sunsets and pretty colored moons. So there's that. People are always asking me, what's the good news? Well, that sense of optimism will continue, and we will see great wordplay. If you're a writer, this is not the time to overthink your writing, but just to sit down and write. Speaking of writing, I was working on the September issue of the Awake Space Astrology magazine because September pretty much starts out with a bang. I was like, "Ooh, I don't want to run into the 3rd of September for this. I want to have this ready." So I was organizing and thinking about it. And I was like, normally I have these kind of 2-page articles about whatever big astrological event is, whether it was the Mars-Uranus conjunction or the Mars-Jupiter conjunction. And then I'm like, oh, well, we've got Pluto moving into Capricorn September 1st. We have Uranus stationing retrograde that day. That's special. And then we've got a lunar eclipse, the Pisces full moon. It's partial, but it's still an eclipse. I'm like, oh my. so much is going on. Pack it all in. So trying to get all that organized and ready to go. Well, Mercury is retrograde and it's a great time to organize. So it's going to be a wild time on the planet, basically, over the next, couple months. But August is its own flavor, and it's very sharp energy. It's very frenetic, chaotic, sharp like a knife or glass. It's its own theme, and it's a little wild. Like I said, I don't think it does Donald Trump a damn bit of good. So even with Venus in Virgo, which it's in his first house, that doesn't necessarily gift him as much as he would like. Okay. It gives him a good self-image, but he's thinking great thoughts about himself, but it doesn't necessarily help him out all that much. This week also, as we look at the Jupiter Uranus conjunction, as we look at the Jupiter-Mars conjunction, it's fugly. It's fugly, my friends. I think we could see an international crisis with this. I do. And I think this could be, again, with NATO. Israel might try to continue to expand the war in the Middle East. You could see Turkey having action. Turkey could actually have some booms in Istanbul. So if you're in Istanbul, be careful. There's a lot going on with this. It's a big week. So I'll read what I've got in headlines at the end of the podcast. Coming up next is some patron shoutouts, because without patrons, there is no podcast, and we are 100% listener supported. Very proud of that. And in the segment after patron shoutouts, then we will talk about how to manage this very frenetic energy, whether you're on the spectrum, whether you're ADHD, autistic, any kind of neurospiciness, or you're just feeling overwhelmed. Like every single person on the planet is probably a little more stimulated than they'd like to be. And we're also moving towards a full moon. We're not there, but we're moving towards it on the 19th. And there may be some big feelings, or at least overstimulated nervous systems. So we're going to talk about how do you deal with that. All right. So that's coming up after the patron shout outs. All right, you heard the music. This is time for patron shoutouts. Without patrons, there is no podcast. The Awake Space Astrology Podcast is 100% supported by listeners like you. All right, big thanks to Marquesa, Nora, Stephanie, Grace, Kavi, Lily, Tiffany, Jay, Lacey, Nicole, SKH, 4444, Oren, Laura, Kinsey, Diane, Jane, Melissa, Natalie, Alex, Lauren, Mary, Rosinid, I hope I got your name right, Victoria, Sherry, Louise, Doris, Janelle, Tees and Floor, Judith, V, Steph, JP, Gigi, Maddie, B, Laura, Allison, Laura, Jacqueline, Bethany 74, Rhea, Elizabeth, Alyssa, Morgan A, Morgan K, Megan, Desiree, Mouthwash, C, Amy, Cindy, Cheryl, Clover, Melinda, Things Jen Says, Candy Moon, Megan, Aprela, Nina, Kayla, Aaron R., Sherry, Jenny, Jess, E. Wills, R. Contreras, Olivia, Michelle, Kate, DeMarquine, Laura, Lola, Mel, Jeremy, Mercury Queen, Andrew, Jody, Ethan, Lace, Nicole, Joya or Hoya, Marcy, Courtney, Stacy, Brinley, Jessica, Shay, Jonique, Lavender, Jenna, Teresa, Melissa, Mary, Sheila, Sabrina, Grisha, Renee, Mommy, Tyler, the daughter of Lilith, Polly, Caroline, Virginia, Jordan, Brenda, Lupe, Carrie, RV, Emily, Gina, Diana, Coral, Cynthia, Cindy, Stephanie, John, Sarah, Serena, Paradox Priestess, Kelly, Mama Shar, Connie, Sophia, Hannah, Amy, Kate, Rhonda, Christ, Catherine, Josephine, Kenneth, Rhonda, Lisa, Val, Sarah, Kate, Leah, Aaron, A. Hunter, Stephanie, Robin, Grace, Kelsey, Alicia, Taylor, Christopher, Alyssa, Allison, Natalie, Mama Des, Robin, Lexi, Lori, Likes, Tawny, Stirred Up Ranch, Andrea, Taylor, Christine, Kimberly, A-Bomb, Paigey 230, exclamation point, retired. All right, we're going to end with retired. That sounds really good. How do you deal with this very frenetic, overstimulating energy? That's what we're going to talk about now. On a personal level, this energy can be really good for us. We could make opportunities. We could see doors that seem like secret doorways, but we could find the lever to open them. We could find treasure out in the world. We could find a sense of hope. All of that's really, really good. And we could also be overstimulated mentally. It might just be that you're much more sensitive right now. It could be you're sensitive to sound, touch, emotionally. It depends on where this is happening for you, okay? And the one thing I'm going to say is remember to breathe, because when we get tight and upset, we tend to hold our breath or take shallow chest breaths. So when we go, that sound, that's not a good breath, okay? It's not. You want to belly breathe, and you want to relax your throat, okay? Nobody get any cheeky ideas, but relax your throat muscles, okay? It's the one part of your body you don't want to think about when you're breathing, okay? You want to relax and put your hand on your diaphragm or the center of your belly, and you want your center of your belly to expand outwards, and you want to inhale through the nose if you can. I get it if you have a deviated septum or a stuffy nose from allergies. Then, of course, breathe through your mouth. But if you can inhale through the nose, you want to do so sharply and deeply, okay? I don't know if you could hear that. And then you want to exhale slowly through the mouth. Do it a couple times until your voice softens. When your voice softens, you're relaxed. Okay? This will lower the cortisol. You don't have to try to make your mind blank. You want to count your breathing. That's important. If you can, and I know it's hard when we're raising kids, okay, or we're at work, I get it. But if you can, do what you can to get some alone time to breathe on your bio break, when you're making a cup of coffee. 5 deep breaths. It takes 90 seconds to wash the hormones that are stress hormones through your system, whether it's a spike in adrenaline or cortisol. The only reason that cycle continues is the stories we repeat to ourselves. So, so-and-so dirty, rotten Joe sent a bad email and you're constantly thinking about it. You're keeping those hormones flowing. Okay. Not saying dirty, rotten so-and-so isn't a jerk. Okay. They are. Let's just establish that as a fact. But if you're telling your mom and your best friend and everyone, you can't believe what Joe did. He sent me this shitty email. You're just going to keep that story alive, and your hormones will continue the story of anger. You're allowing your amygdala to run the show. That's your thoughts thinking you instead of you thinking your thoughts. But you have the control. Take those 5 to 10 deep breaths. It might take you 20. It might take you 30 on a bad day. It might take you 50. Okay? I've had times where I've been like, fuck it. It's like, I want to stay mad. Sometimes we do. But is it helping or hurting you? Is it getting you where you want to go? Is it giving you a solution? Is it giving you an outcome? The reason I'm bringing this up is I had a parent on TikTok ask for their child because I warned about that full moon and this week leading up to it because it's easy to be overstimulated. And they're like, hey, my child's autistic and they have a really hard time when the energy is intense. And as somebody who is on the spectrum, I get it. I purposely have arranged for myself to be in a place where it's very, very quiet. There's very little extra stimulation. I have very little tolerance outside of it right now. Okay? If you're feeling raw, if you're feeling emotional, if you're just feeling on edge, there may not be a good reason for it, like that you can identify. The good reason is you're overstimulated. You don't need to know why. Okay. Why is seldom a productive question. You just know that you are and then think of the remedies. Now, for me, I am very, very sensitive auditorially. Okay. My auditory senses, I can hear dog whistles still a little bit, even though I'm 55, but not as acutely as when I was young. But I still hear electricity. I like people's voices, different tones can be too much for me. This is not a time for me to be in public with a lot of people around. And I don't want to hear sirens. I don't want to hear police cars. I don't want to hear dogs barking, or whining. Whining is worse than barking for me. So I'm lucky. My kids are grown. I'm a middle-aged woman and I have put myself somewhere very, very quiet where I can get enough sleep, enough rest. I make sure I'm taking nightly soaks in an Epsom salt bath. A lot of self-care right now, partly because I overdid it over the last 4 years and did way too much one-on-one readings. Way too much. And overpeopled. Not that I don't love every single person I've done a reading for. I love doing readings. It's a lot of energy. And it's a lot on my brain because I do a lot of calculations inside my head. And it's a lot. Not whining, just a fact. And so I needed a break because I was a month past burnout when I left. Probably a month past burnout before the month past burnout that I identified it. And so I've had the luxury of being able to do that. But man, I remember not having this luxury not that long ago. And so what would I do? Well, certain clothes are very, very comfy. So I like hoodies. Okay. But you might have a favorite t-shirt or a blanket that you use to feel cozy. You might have a favorite smell. You might have your favorite music. You might like to take walks or lift weights or garden. Okay. And it's a great time of year to go out and pick all those wonderful goodies you've been growing, right? Maybe you do better talking to a friend. I will warn you though, if you really need support, and it's good to get a therapist because friends aren't always equipped to help us. And they may be going through it too. Okay. So focusing on fun things. That's something Matilda and I do. Okay, that's something Matilda and I do. We send each other funny videos or cute animal videos. And in fact, our second season of Sassy Sears is going to start up again, and you'll get it next weekend. And one of the things we're including in the second season is creators that make us laugh and sharing who we find very funny. And so these things, laughter can help a lot. Don't let yourself get, spiraled into despair or worry. It'll be very easy for our brains to go in 60 different directions. It's not a flex. It's not a flex. I know a lot of people get social points by sad farming or trauma dumping. We see it online a lot. And psychologists are very concerned about this, and rightly so. I'm not saying that we have to mask and pretend everything's okay. Okay, but there's a reason we have a venting chamber in the Awake Space Patreon chat. And the reason it's there is it's to contain that. It gives people a chance to vent. Okay. And it keeps it in one spot, so it's not all over the chat, because if you go into a lot of message boards, you'll see it all over the place. And so I wanted a spot where it could be in there and people could tap in, tap out as per their emotional ability and readiness, instead of, having it everywhere, which can be overwhelming. Okay. I'm not a positive vibes only person, but I also know that emotions are contagious. Okay. So I'm not saying if you have problems, don't go get help. Okay. I'm not. And I am going to say, when we don't celebrate people's successes and victories and good days, as much as we commiserate with the shit shows they're going through, we kind of got it backwards. We want to balance it out a little bit. So this week, I want you to be easy on yourself and other people. So they might be irritable. They might be reactive. And this could be like normally very sane and rational people. This doesn't just mean people have mental health issues. This could be people who are normally rock steady, but they're just tapped. Okay. Because maybe they need to change what they're doing. This is an opportunity regardless. Jupiter is always opportunity. Sometimes it comes in a form we particularly like, and sometimes it's a shit show that forces us to make a change. That can happen, okay? And so it's recognizing that. Now, who are going to feel the most stress in this one? Well, directly with Jupiter-Mars conjunction, it could be Geminis, Virgos, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Okay. They may be feeling it the most, whether it's a rising sun, moon, Mercury, Venus, or Mars. And you might feel like you're going nuts. You may feel like you're on crazy pills right now. That was a Zoolander reference. You could feel like your skin could feel sensitive. Your hands might be sensitive. You might be sensitive to textures. Okay. Or even sounds. Give yourself a minute and breathe. Okay. Breathe. It's not a platitude. It is a biological fact that if you take deep breaths mindfully, you are able to stop the patterns that continue the release of stress hormones, but you got to do it for about 90 seconds. Okay. Can't just give like 5 quick breaths. That's not breathing. That's hyperventilating. Don't do that. Okay. You want to feel the belly expand like it's a rubber tire filling up with air, like an inner tube. Okay. That will help more than anything else. And yes, You can get a mani-pedi, take a walk, go work out in the gym. If you don't like gyms, do some baby weights. Go grocery shopping, whatever floats your boat. My mom does laundry. I know. It's weird. My mom's meditation is literally hanging clothes up on the line. I was helping her the other day, and she had some kind of larger items. My mom's a very short in stature person. And so I was helping her put things up on the line, and I was like, man, I haven't done this in 40 years with you. You know, because I hated it as a kid. I was like, we have a dryer. Why are we hanging clothes on the line? Well, my mom likes how they smell. She's very sensitive to smells. My mom's a Gemini. She's got a Taurus, Venus, and Mars. She's a Leo rising. And she's got a Libra moon. Extra is a thing with her. And I personally do not like how things feel when they're hung on the line. I like how soft they come out of the dryer. I'm a texture person too, but a different way. But, what drove me nuts as a teenager is endearing to me now. So we change as we grow. The things that used to either hurt my feelings or annoy me when I was young actually make me chuckle now. So there's always hope. And that's hope. Hope is a good thing. Recognizing what's going well, even in the face of a shitstorm, even in the face of exceedingly difficult circumstances. You find a couple good things in the day. I learned to do that as a little kid when I was going through a lot. And I continued it into adulthood. Back in 2017, my great divorce year, which it was my idea to get divorced. And of course, he was petty, beyond petty. And I was left with no resources. Yeah. And it was a very stressful year. I wish I could be as skinny as I was when I was that stressed out. Of course, not being able to afford food, played a role. But anyway, or extra food. So at least I was cute. But one of the things I did is I looked at clouds every day. Because clouds, I love their shapes. And I love to imagine, the stories in the clouds. Or I'd watch the leaves flutter in the wind. Sometimes that was the most positive thing I had to focus on in the moment. But I had learned through a lifetime of experience that if all I did was complain or focus on what was real, which was the shitty stuff, because I don't know why the only thing real is shitty. That's not reality. That's one aspect of it. But I had nature. I could look at nature. I could listen to the birds. And I still do that, even though life is so much better now. In fact, I saw a beautiful yellow bird today. I don't think it was a goldfinch. I think it was a meadowlark. And then I saw these birds. I can't remember what they called. My mom and dad told me, but I forgot. There's the bluest wings. The bluest wings. Absolutely gorgeous. I enjoy the smell of the ingredients I'm cooking. As I put one thing into the pan and then the next, and how the aroma changes as at the different stages of cooking. Yes, I'm hyper aware. I've trained myself to be, because we are born and we die. It's a guarantee. The one thing we are guaranteed in this life is we will expire at some point. And if we are only going to live 75, 80, 100 years max, maybe 105, right? I want to experience it all. I want to feel it. I want to smell. I want to taste it. I want to hear it. And sometimes it is a bit much. And so we can withdraw as much as we can. We can soothe as much as we can. And then re-enter one thing at a time. To do so deliberately gives us so much more leverage because momentum is a thing. Okay. The law of inertia is a thing. An object in motion stays in motion, but the speed of that object, the velocity of that object will speed up the more energy it's put towards it. Right. And so if we're in a spiral, and it can happen to all of us, right? It doesn't take much to kick it over. Then it could be hard to interrupt the pattern. That's why breathing and mindfulness is important. And that's how we get through this week. Now, if you've got little ones, that might be a little hard. So I would keep things kind of calm after dinner, not watching exciting stuff on television, but keeping it kind of low key and simple and soothing. Feel good stuff. I keep the news off around kids this week. Kids pick up on everything. You might be in the other room watching the news and they might be listening to it, or they might be hearing your conversations. I had a really nostalgic experience this last week when my parents had a guest spend the night with their family that they hadn't seen in a decade. They'd been in the Peace Corps in Mongolia 28 years ago. I know, because my son was born while my dad was at the airport in San Francisco getting ready to fly out. And I'd heard a lot about this person over the years, and my mother is especially fond of them. And I was chilling out after dinner and just hanging out in my room for a little bit and letting my parents have their visit. And I could hear my parents' voices muffled through the door, telling stories and chuckling and laughing. And it brought me back to when I was a kid and I was supposed to be asleep and they were playing cards or had friends over. And it seemed ever so late at night. It was probably like 7:30 or something. But, 4 or 5 years old and hearing the adults talk. And for me, it's a soothing sound. I have Venus and Gemini. I need to hear you as much as I can talk. Believe it or not, talking like this actually makes me tired. That's one of the reasons readings have kind of depleted me over time is I like dialogue. I like to hear what other people have to say, right? But I'm hyperverbal. And so people have to be very confident to kind of butt in. I don't care if I'm interrupted. I really don't. Because I'll be like, I'll pick up another thought later. But I love that give and take. And yet I really love to listen to other people speak. And I think a lot of kids do. I used to get in trouble. My mom used to call me big ears because I was always listening to adult conversations. And so many adults didn't realize the little ears or big ears were listening. So I would be a little censored in how I speak if I had little ones this week, because you got to remember they only have so much experience on this planet. They may be wise little beings, but they only have so much life experience, and how they interpret things is through the lens of that experience. And they might fixate on things. And so keeping things soothed this week would be good. This would be a good time to color, or especially over the weekend as we get closer and closer to the full moon in Aquarius, which is a doozy. It is a doozy, my friends. And that's going to, we're probably going to see a lot of disruptive sleep over the next week. Normally it's like 2-3 days before the full moon, 2-3 days after the full moon, but certainly on the full moon, we can see disruptive sleep. With the Mars-Jupiter conjunction, all of our nervous systems are being overstimulated. We may still have that. Things that can help you sleep, those Epsom salt baths, magnesium spray, melatonin. I'm kind of doubling up on stuff. I'm taking melatonin and doing magnesium. It's just, that's what's helping me and getting my sleep hygiene back together, because I had horrendously disrupted sleep for quite some time. That makes for a very tired Laurie and a very cranky one. And so meeting your needs. And kids might be a little reactive. They might have some temper tantrums. They might have a hard time expressing themselves. They might not be able to tell you what's wrong because they don't know. They just are uncomfortable. Think if it's hard to describe as an adult, how do you think it is when you're 6, 7, 8, 9? They might feel buzzy or just cranky, and that's okay. Feelings are feelings, and it's a cranky time on the planet, and each one of us is going to feel that a little bit. But it's also a good time to laugh. Comedy is a good one. I wouldn't watch like slapstick comedy right before bed. I might watch it on like the weekend afternoon and get the wiggles out. I might dance if you're getting ready to start school, which I can't believe school is going to start on full moon. These people do not use astrology. These people are cray cray. Okay. And again, that full moon happens on the 19th. But I really wanted to talk about it this week to kind of get you prepared. It's just kind of a lot. It's a lot. We're living in some wild times, and that Jenga tower is swaying. In fact, I'll say the top blocks are probably starting to pop down. So, there's that. So, that's where we're at, guys. I think it's time for some more patron shoutouts. And after patron shoutouts, we will take a look at the full moon. And then we'll look at what's in the headlines after that. And I might answer a question or two from the patron-only Q&A Googly forum. Remember, patrons, that's where you ask your questions, is in the Google forum. All right, time for more patron shout-outs. All right, we've got another round of patron shout-outs. We've got Colleen, Anne, Laurie or Cherry, Ali221, Christina, Matea, Jennifer, Shanti, Anthony, Kari, Chelsea, Joyce, Anna, Kathy, the Astral Gemini, Jody, Jacob, Mac, Ruby, Tina, Michaela, Kat, Katie, Hope, Amanda, Lori, Snow, Jessica, Wendy, Leah, Simara, LB, Rainbows and Sunshine Gal, Julie FM, Mina, Courtney, Lua, Karima, Rhonda, Lindsay, Rochelle, Vanessa, Marie, Elise, Taylor, Shay, Pablo, Nicole, Victoria, Brittany, baby, Jenny, Sabrina, Rachel, Augustus, Kay, Stephanie, Blanca, Shay, Tough Wizard, Amanda, Shannon, Victor, Rachel, Jayla, Stephanie, Emily, Pamela, Chris 2206 Step, Kendall, Bridget, Amanda, Alyssa, Sol, Sarah, Dan, Shadia. I think I just said your name wrong. I hope I said it right. Ashley, Stacy, the Vulture Witch, Emily, Jen, Enfantome, Niera, Elle, Valerie, Mimi, Michelle, Ellen, Christine, Tiffany, Ash, Rukia, Sunny, Sierra, Corey, Jennifer, Chin, Hillary, Paul, Lauren, Parrish, Brittany, Gail, Lavina, Jessica, Carlos, Christine, Lady, Marcy Lynn, Hudson, Shannon, Zion, Adrian, Nikki, Nicole, Megan, Zandra, Sevi, Amy, Betty, Pelu, Caitlin, Jojo, Derek, Ali, Charame, Tay, Victoria, Lisa, Tammy, Tori, Amanda, Dina, Mariah, Rebecca, Andrea, Stephanie, Beth, Aaron, YS, Patricia, Elon or Elon, Lee, Winter, Shelma, Sarah, Kimberly, Nabila, Dahlia, Candace, Serena, Roz, Milagros, Cameron, Rhonda, Cassie Bees, Stephanie, Jess, Caitlin, Maggie, Chase, Carol, Patricia, Sophia, and Taylor. And we're going to leave that there. On to the show. All right, we got a full moon brewing, and it happens on the 19th. The 19th, which is next Monday. And it is the DNC convention. It's the Democrat convention. I don't know why these people don't use astrologers to plan their events. Maybe because they're dumb. I don't know. I don't think they're dumb. I think they dismiss it out of hand, which is foolish. Let's just say they're foolish. I don't think inside the convention there's going to be anything other than the drama of a party atmosphere. I don't think there's going to be anybody contesting the ticket. I think they managed to wrangle everybody on board. I think things should be pretty good. There might be somebody who sneaks past security, though, that causes some trouble. There might be some violence inside. I put that at maybe a 20% chance. I think really the risk is happening maybe around the second venue on the street. Could be vehicular violence. It could happen ahead of the full moon, but I think, which would be in the morning, early morning hours, there could be a big accident. It could be a tanker full of gasoline that explodes. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an intentional explosion. We could see big weather pop up with this full moon. It's a doozy. Okay, it's just a freaking doozy. I think we could see a lot of explosions around the world, and I think we're going to see increased seismic activity with it. I do. I think that could be off the coast of Oregon, California. It could be up near BC and Washington State with the Cascadia subduction zone. But it could also be Japan with that recent 7.1. That got me because I was really looking at the big seismic stuff for this full moon. So the fact that there was a 7.1 just tells me we're looking at something maybe bigger coming up, and that might be an 8. Now, if it's off the coast of Oregon, I don't think it'll be anything bigger than 6.5. Okay, which is still plenty big. No Southern California. I'm not talking about you. You're September. Although it's possible. It could happen. New Madrid fault, you ask? Potentially this week coming up. This week. So around the 13th, 14th, 15th. Could be something up to a 5.5. I don't think anything bigger than that. I don't think it's resulting in fracking. I think it would be the New Madrid fault, but I don't think it's that super big one. I don't think it's the big one. But you'll certainly feel it. It'll rattle your windows. It won't be devastating. I had somebody on my TikTok go, it'll be devastating in the Midwest. No, it won't be. A 6 might be, but a 5.5, the bricks might fall down. Older buildings might have some issues, and any building on like cinder block foundations might have a problem. Which our foundations need to be a little more solid than that. I don't understand why that's allowed in building codes, but that's just me. We could see more big storms whipping up over this next week into that full moon. And these could be very damaging to infrastructure. We could see some crops hugely affected by those. Other days, I think honestly today, the 12th into the 13th, is potential seismic activity. Globally, anywhere there is an active fault, you could see an increase. of seismic activity. And then again, New Madrid fault. I have my eye on that. I was looking back at older earthquakes from like the 1800s, things like that. And I was like, oh, this week isn't good. So do your best. That's all you can do is do. That full moon is a doozy. And obviously, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in depth next week on the day of the full moon. Give you some strategies for working with it. If you're a patron, then you've got your full moon rituals in the magazine. If you're at the $15 level and up, you can still grab the Awake Space Astrology magazine in the Patreon shop. And I'll put that link in the show notes. I tell you, it's a wacky world we live in. By the way, that full moon isn't fun for Donald Trump either. It really messes with him. He may have a major health crisis with that full moon. He could have, and I have this back in my predictions back in 2022, 2023 on what I think might happen. He could have an aneurysm, a stroke. He could have renal failure, those types of things, or problems associated with it. And it may be public. It may be public. He may display this in public. So we'll see. Although it's interesting that they have him not campaigning over the next 3 weeks, and it could be health related. Or if he's got the astrologer, I think he does, they may have taken him out of public view for this, which would be smart. But there's definitely something going on, and it'll still wreck him publicly. Whatever's coming up on that full moon is going to wreck his public reputation. It does not benefit him. Okay. Somebody asked me, well, if Jupiter goes onto his sun, then won't it bring him favor? And I'm like, might give him a little more physical vitality. But it's not necessary. He's not going to be president. Okay, period. Jupiter on his sun is not enough to do jack all for him. Okay. It's just not. Any astrologer saying he's going to win because of that has not studied astrology or mundane astrology very well. Okay. And all those ones talking about timelines. Oh my God. I know I went on about this last week, but it's driving me crazy. The astrology hasn't changed. They just aren't good at interpretation. Okay. It didn't suddenly, this is like the biggest Pee Wee Herman excuse I've ever seen. Oh, I meant to do that. No, I've been saying the same thing for years because the astrology has not changed. Just because you read a book and watched some YouTube's videos does not make you a predicting astrologer. And it's okay if you're saying, hey, I'm learning. This is what I think might happen. But if you're going to double down and then say, well, a timeline changed, that's bullshit. It's bullshit. That is bogus. Also, I was going to say, I'm so grateful. A lot of people have been recommending me on TikTok, and I'm really, really grateful for that. It's very nice to be acknowledged, but they also talked about if somebody charges like $500 for a reading. My readings run around that, although I am scaling back on 101s just because I have my own transits coming up. We'll see how I feel after November 19th. Once Pluto gets the hell out of Capricorn, because it enters Capricorn again on September 1st, and it will be opposite my Sun and my Mercury again. Oh, joy. I'm like, oh, is that going to be like walking through molasses again? I don't know. I can't guarantee it. So we're going to find out. So I'm scaling back some of the things I do so that I can serve a wider group of people without tapping my own energy reserves. Because I really overdid it last year. Actually, and it wasn't just Pluto in opposition to my Mercury and Sun. It was Jupiter was on my Saturn. That was super cool. Not. Talk about, I felt like I had concrete shoes walking through molasses. So I don't have, it's not as gnarly coming into this fall, but I'm like, Mars will be on my Sun and my Mercury in late October. Let's just take it easy. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's a lot. So I think I'm just gonna breathe easy. Now I feel a little more relaxed now that we've moved past the Capricorn full moon back on my birthday in July, because that was actually a really good day. It was a really good day. I had a great birthday. It was a little overwhelming because that's the day Biden stepped down. And as I had said for years now, I wasn't convinced Biden was the candidate. So of course I blew up on TikTok and my Patreon blew up. And I wanted to spend my birthday with my parents. So people are like, we want you to go live. I'm like, I'm with my parents on my birthday and I'm a Cancer and that's what's going to happen. So, and then I went live later. That live stream, by the way, from the 21st of July is a free post on my Patreon, which you can join for free, but it's a public post and you guys can watch that from then because that was really cool. It was super fun. Yeah. So it's talking about what they were charging for readings. Or what they said was a good price. So don't charge, if somebody's charging $500. Yeah, if they're inexperienced, then they're doing a natal reading for $500 and they don't give you much for that. That's overpriced. But as a consulting astrologer, my prices do run close to that. I have limited space. There's only one of me. I have 30 years of experience, so I do charge more. But I'm looking at being able to serve a wider group of people. And so that's why I'm looking into how I can do some coaching groups where people learn how to leverage the energy in their own chart. You won't even have to know a lot about astrology. You just need to be able to identify a few things. And that'll be part of it where I'm like, hey, what you got? Okay. So if you've got this is how you operate. And if you've got this is what's going to move you forward. And it's not just like a singular answer, but like a list of options that might, you do the one that resonates best with where you're at. I call it applied astrology. Okay. Not everybody's going to be an astrologer. It might sound really cool and sexy, but not everybody's going to either want to do the study. It might not click with you, that's okay. But there's ways to use the information. And that's what I want to get out to you guys. So that's what I'm kind of working on now. Is like, how can we work and do some, coaching, whether it's business coaching, life coaching, and just help you ground into who you are and find your value. I don't care what it takes to do that. I have a lot of tools. I have studied so many different things in my lifetime to help people find their value. That's my core mission is to help you understand you. So that's where we're going to go with this. And yeah, some people do charge that much and they charge that much because they have experience. But if somebody's 25, and no shade to you if you're 25, telling you they started studying when they were 4 years old doesn't count. Okay. My daughter was on my lap from the age of 2. Watching me do charts. She read my astrology books. In fact, she was just telling me about a memory she had of when she was about 4 or 5. And I was cutting fabric for dolls, for her Barbies, and crocheting edges and making capes and dresses for them. And she used to like to take the fabric and put tape and design her own clothes for them when she was a toddler. But while I'd be cutting things, she'd be reading through my astrology books, and learning about it. So she was exposed to that. Is she a professional astrologer? No, she's not. So she's had 28 years of exposure. Okay, 29 years of exposure, actually. And that doesn't make her an astrologer. So somebody claiming they started as a very young child, unless they were actually studying, I only know one person that's a professional, to my knowledge. Okay. There may be many. Okay. But to my knowledge, there's only one person I know who really started studying in childhood, and that's because their next door neighbor was a world-renowned astrologer and thought the young person was very, very bright and took them under their wing. That is rare. That's just rare. Okay. So there we have it. That full moon is a doozy. All right. So you'll get your strategies on how to navigate that energy, and we'll do some soothing breathing exercises again. If you're a patron, just get into the Patron resources collection, and you'll find the meditation that I guide you through your breathing to soothe you. I did that knowing these times are wacky and crazy, and sometimes we need a little bit of help. All right. So, do another little segment of patron shoutouts, and then we will go through this week's headlines and what I think is going to be up on deck and what you can expect to see out in the world. It's certainly going to be interesting. All right, our last round of patron shoutouts. Remember, without patrons, there is no show because we're 100% listener supported because of listeners like you. Sparkleworm, Meg, Stephanie, Deborah, Courtney, Wesley, Lonnie, Taylor, Marie, Emily, Kelly, Emily, Sarah, M. Knight, Mallory, Carrie, Rebecca, Sanji, Brandy, Courtney, Ashley, Paige, Kelly, D. Bismus, I think so, D. Bismus, Robin, Barbara, Courtney, Alexandra, Stephanie, Sabrina, Appy B, Paula, Yari, Darlene, Haley, Steph, Mavi, Sydney, Jackie, Just Us 3, Stephanie, Caitlin, Samantha, Stephanie, Trinity, Grace Ann, Melanie, Stacy, Angie, Amanda, Maurice, Danielle, Jennifer, Robin, Renee, Tracy, 0204, B, A.H., Rachel, Barbara, Allie, Bianca, Mike, M. Hawk, Steph, Isabel, Kim, Emily, Carly Ann, Carla, Molly, Deborah, Terry, Leah, Sabrina, Abigail, Andrew, R.R., Chris Silva, Susan or Suzanne, Dawn, Lauren, Allie, Bailey, Amy Lee, Carrie, Dawn Eads, Deanne, Jillian, B. Crestituto, Denise, Amy, Emmy, Isaac, Julie, Lauren, Naomi, Caitlin, Mew, Deanna, Leah, Redest World, Samira, Taryn, Katie, Tyler, Angela, Seashells, Ghosting, Maddie, Nix, Jane, Oren, Christine, Regina, Jessica, Cheryl, Sandy, Nat, Zion, Jay, Tiffany, Yvonne, M, L. Carter, LMB, Breck, Yuritsa, Claudia, Danielle, Sheba, Jay, Victor, Ghoulie B, John Yu, Lauren, Hi, Carrie, Mr., Kate Sharon, Fire Girl, Nana, Cynthia, Ostrid, Jeanette, Alex, Joshua, Tiffany S, Tiffany M, Taylor, Rose, Carla, Kathy, Katie, Sandy, Tamika, Maritza, Naeli, Destiny, John, Hunter, Mira or Myra, Nicaea, Serene, Tyler, Jonathan, Henrietta, Louis or Louie, Jessica, Kelly, Elena, Isabel, Dot, Emily, Nicole, and Amy. That rounds out our patron shoutouts for this week. I look forward to new names next week and familiar names as we go through patron shoutouts. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. Alrighty, we're looking at what's in the headlines. What's in the headlines? This comes to you courtesy of the Awake Space Patreon. It's from the Awake Space magazine, which is 133 pages, lots of articles. Patrons, those articles that you get read by me are coming out to you this week. It's all recorded. I just need to edit it. And it will get to you so you have some extra listening material. I don't read the what's in the headlines. I just read the articles. And we've got some good ones this month. All right. So August 10th through the 13th, we have the moon in Scorpio. Okay. And today is the 12th. And this is where I think there's going to be some big action Monday and Tuesday. We could see a natural event or terrorist attack that is difficult to control or contain, so the damage is pretty big. We could see a huge storm with big rain, snow, and ice melt, issues with flooding and huge waves. Violence is going to escalate in Venezuela. Sizable earthquake over 6.0. Potential in all major fault lines, looking at the Oregon coast, Mexico, West Coast, Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and or Indonesia, Philippines, and Japan. Internet disruptions, payment gateway failures, hacking, and ransomware. We could see graveyards, cemeteries, catacombs, and mortuaries in the headlines, waterborne illness, toxic waste, sewage, and sewers, water quality at stake, or poisoned groundwater in the headlines. Issues with oil refineries and gas pipelines, platforms, oil production or pumping, maritime accidents, attacks, piracy, and insurgencies by sea. Issues in the Persian Gulf, Red Sea, Straits of Hormuz, and Suez Canal. Mediterranean expansion of conflict, which could be more things happening in Lebanon. We could see Biden and or Putin could face serious health crisis or political challenge. Assassination attempts of world leaders, political candidates, and people of note. Big information leaks, which this one was the Trump hacking, the Trump campaign hacking, revealed or serious espionage allegations, mass accident, loss of life, or terrorist attack, accident at theme park, or crush at a sporting event. Food poisoning or illness, dam failure, flooding on a river or lake, or lakes, bridge and levee failures due to weather and or seismic activity, potential Midwest earthquake up to 5.5 causes nominal damages. Remember that the transits are global, accidents or political upheaval can also be big storms or natural events, and vice versa. They all go boom. All right, August 13th through the 15th, the moon moves into Sagittarius and the tea is spilling hot, lies are exposed, and agreements and alliances fail. We've got forest fires, lightning strikes, arsons, and fires go out of control because of wind, tropical storms and hurricanes, typhoons, and issues with warm seas. Tensions erupt in the Straits of Taiwan or territorial waters of the Philippines. Issues with Iran could be leadership and or action taken with drones or sea-to-air missiles or maybe an ICBM, but I don't think so. International disputes increase, truces and ceasefires fail. War breaks out in all regions with tensions. United Nations, NATO, EU, and other international organizations have crises. Supreme Court justices in the headlines or High Court justices in other countries. Big vehicular violence, looking at Chicago, New York, Atlanta, Paris, Berlin, Los Angeles, and London. Riots, protests, mass violence. Donald Trump gets bad news. Pope's health or other religious leaders' health. Religious leaders or organizations under fire. Maritime incidents, accidents, and issues in ports. Big international accident involves either people from many countries or involves a border crossing. Accidents with missile and or satellite launches. Sizable earthquake 6.0 or higher in the Pacific Rim. Other regions could see up to a 5.8. A massive storm or issues to do with a massive storm. So it could be the results of a storm or a storm incoming, could be a hurricane or something that starts at sea and goes through more than one country or region. And then August 15th through the 17th, we have the moon in Capricorn. Big weather event could involve massive loss of life or infrastructure damage. Failed governments and countries with coalition governments. Issues with Iran, could be war with Israel, or it could be issues in Persian Gulf itself, including Straits of Hormuz. Tensions erupt in the Straits of Taiwan, territorial waters of the Philippines. Big event could be a storm causing infrastructure damage, erosion causing storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, changing temperatures, thaws or freezes, even snow in lower elevations. Depends on your location. Remember, it is winter in the southern hemisphere. Bombing or terrorist attack or explosion of some kind. We could see the UK government under pressure and an issue potentially with King Charles's health. NATO crisis could involve Turkey. Issue with oil pipeline platform or drilling operation at sea. Seismic activity increased up to a 6.5 or a volcanic action offshore. Leader deposed or coup d'etat or world leader dies, and it could be all of that in one day. Celebrity scandal or breakup, CEO or CFO removed from position by board of directors. Accident on a mountain, landslide, mudslide, rocks fall, and sinkholes. And then the moon is in Aquarius August 17th through the 19th. The moon in Aquarius, things just get a little weirder and it's hard to communicate. Israel could expand the war in the Middle East and it may crack down on domestic protests, explosions, launch failures, satellite failures, lights in the sky, meteors. Or meteorites, big windstorms globally, issues with ocean currents, temperatures, and turbulence. Could see a tragic air accident, plane shot down, or helicopter crash. Banking crisis, issue with payment gateways, communication failures, internet glitches, or hacking announced. No, that is not anything to do with what we talked about already this week. Seismic activity above a 6.0 increase globally in all active regions. Looking at Indonesia, Pacific Islands, New Zealand, off the coast of Antarctica, Mid-Atlantic Ridge, Taiwan, and Japan. It could even go into like Hindu Kush region, Iran, maybe even Turkey, but I really think like probably Japan is most likely given it's 7.1 earlier in the month. Unseasonable temperatures and or extreme temperatures, either freezing or extreme heat. It depends where in the world you are. Icebergs, melting glaciers, and sea ice are in the headlines. Fertilizer, farm technology, and land security concerns increased in major cities. This is global. Vehicular violence in crowded spaces. EU and or NATO crisis. Surprise announcement regarding political leader, figure, elected official. Merger not allowed to go through because of anti-monopoly laws. All markets are volatile in big capital letters, including crypto. Could go up, could go down. We could see power plant, chemical plant accidents and explosions. That makes me really nervous thinking about that power plant in Ukraine. Tech sector, volatile, issues with AI, more layoffs, internet disruptions, huge protests in Germany, France, and the UK. I saw that back at the end of July. So that's how we're going to start off next week. That is what I think we're going to hear in the headlines. That is obviously not the only things going on, and it has nothing to do necessarily with you personally. This is just what I think we're going to see the news report on potentially, or see in headlines or on social media being discussed. That's just one of the things we do that is always on the record at the Awake Space in the magazine that you can find in the shop, or if you're a $15 member and up, you get it every single month. Back issues are also included in your tier, so you can just get the old issues as well. You just go into the shop. It will be enabled for you there. All right. Up next, we're going to be talking some questions from patrons. I've got a Q&A library where I've recorded people's questions. I'm much more organized than I was last year, where I kind of did like a patron-only podcast and included questions in it. Now I just give a separate Q&A file. And we have in the Patreon, we have collections. There is a Q&A library. So we've started doing it that way because I rented a clue bus. I know. Sometimes the old girl is slow. Let's get to the Q&A. Alrighty, this is the Q&A from the Googly form that all patrons have access to. You can find it in the Q&A library. I realized somebody told me for some reason it wasn't collecting responses. I don't know how the toggle got toggled off, but it's Mercury retrograde. We'll blame Mercury. I got to toggle back on. So if you've got questions about metaphysics, about astrology, about energy work, about crystals, dreams, whatever it is, feel free to ask. Kim is asking, how do I book you for an astrology reading like the one you did for VP Harris? Thank you, Kim. What I did, that's my year ahead reading, effectively. That's my year ahead reading. I don't have a ton of openings. I'm open through December 20th, and then I don't have anything else open. But if you want to book, you're going to have to book out. I think somebody said they couldn't find anything until October. But that calendar, that's what I go by. So there's not a lot of spots open. So with the time I have available, and that's just, I was thinking about opening it up, and we'll see how it goes, but I don't think I will. I'm really, really tired physically, and I'm trying to get my energy back. And but yeah, so if you want to book a year ahead with me, that's where I look at the solar returns, the transits, the lunar returns, and give them month by month. My clients report great things. And I have this weird talent, okay, beyond the big stuff, like, oh, you might get a promotion, or, hey, don't quit your job. It looks like your boss is going to leave, or the person who's been giving you a hard time is going to leave, or maybe you need to wait it out and start looking for other stuff, or maybe you've been thinking about moving, and I'll be like, oh, that move looks like it's happening in this date range. I'm really good at plumbing issues. I have saved more clients money by preparing them. I'd be like, hey, it's either a flood or it's your plumbing. And if it's your plumbing, you got to watch out on this date. One client got a hold of me after, like, they did a year ahead and then did an astro energies, which is kind of a shorter time frame. It's not a full year. It's like 2-3 months. It's a shorter reading, and we just kind of laser in and dial in, get more specific, right? And within 6 months, she had booked 2 readings. And I was like, on these dates in March, there's water. There's a lot of water in your house, and you need to be really aware. And she was like, I know. You told me about it in the last reading. You were really insistent. And I was like, well, if I'm giving you the same day range and I'm being insistent in 2 readings, you need to take this very, very seriously. Not more. And it was like a couple days before those dates. It was like, not even a week. A day after the day I told her about, I get this email going, the toilet gurgled. I called the plumber, and it was good I did, because there was like a major clog in the line. She's like, that saved me a lot of money. I'm like, yay. I love saving people money because I'm a frugal person. I've helped people with their roofs and gutters. It's just really weird. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a Cancer and I'm really tuned into the household stuff. But yeah, odd things. Like, yes, we can talk about, but don't come to me asking me when you get in a relationship. Okay. I'm going to say it right now. I've had a couple new clients, even though they've been listening to the podcast, come and going, and when am I going to find that somebody? I'm like, did you just ask me that question in this reading? Because if you're coming to me through my socials, which is TikTok, or you're coming to me from this podcast, do not ask me if you're going to meet your special someone. You know how I am about this. I want to tell you to focus on you. Focus on you. Build yourself up. Get yourself stable. Attract a partner, not a fixer-upper. You buy a fixer-upper as a house. You want a solid deal in a partner, okay? And that means you got to be solid. You can't be a fixer-upper either, okay? Don't do that. Do not ask me about that bullshit, okay? Okay. Capiche? Capiche. All right. We're good. All right. Thank you for asking that, Kim. So you guys can check out the link to see if you can find a booking. I know I'm filling up, but that's just all there is to it. Ren asks a really fun question. Is there a tradition of associating particular gemstones or metals with planets or signs in Western tropical astrology? Do you personally consider your natal chart when choosing jewelry? Yeah. In both Vedic and Western tropical, there is an association of metals and gems. I think Vedic is a lot more, they lean more into that because they use them for remedies. We see things more like your birthstone. Okay. That's Western tropical astrology. Okay. And metals. So I don't necessarily look at my birth chart. I just buy whatever I feel like buying. Normally I love silver, but I just got this ring. It's an onyx ring. It came out of an estate jewelry collection. I love estate jewelry. I'm the word, but I have an 8th house Venus, right? So I don't think you always have to consult your chart. I think if you're in tune with yourself, the chart reflects your interests, right? And so 8th house Venus, I love estate jewelry. And I got this gorgeous onyx ring and it's gold. And I don't normally wear a lot of gold, but I love this ring. I love the way it felt. I love the way it looked. And that's kind of my rule. Okay. So, and gold, I don't tend to wear as much. I tend to prefer silver. I always have, even before I knew about astrology. And silver is the metal associated with Cancer. So gold is associated with Leo. But yeah, you can look up the rulership book. The rulership book by Rexy Bills will have that kind of thing in there. That's kind of cool. Don't believe the internet, though. They have all, like, people just make shit up for their blogs. They'll just do, like, what clickbait can I create today? Right. Haley asks, I'm very new to astrology, but learning a lot from you. Can you explain the relationship between astrology and free will? Oh my gosh, free will is really up on deck. How can outcomes be able to be predicted, but we still have choices that impact the outcome? That's a really good question. And the reason why I say free will is up on deck, Haley, is because I wrote an article about cultivating free will in the August issue of the Awake Space magazine. And I did a video on TikTok on Sunday, August 11th, about free will. And so let's talk about this. So in mundane astrology, there's very little free will. We're looking at weather. We're looking at earthquakes. We're looking at political events. We're looking at the collective unconscious versus the collective consciousness. On an individual level, we can see time frames that are more likely to have certain outcomes. How you meet that outcome is your free will. I think the idea that fate and free will are completely separate and dichotomous it's a binary way of thinking. Free will means we can be deliberate in our thinking. Okay. And so I always like to say to my clients, okay, you've got a window of opportunity, but if all you do is sit on your couch thinking the universe is bringing me goodies, you might find $5 or a $20, if you're really lucky, $100 stuffed in the couch cushions. But if you get out and go meet people, go to the store, follow your guidance. Your guidance sometimes is a little quiet, right? But it's just like, hey, you should go get ice cream. And then you meet somebody that you've known for a long time at the ice cream store. And they're like, hey, we're hiring. You might get a good job. Okay. So I think often free will is mistaught because of how organized religion uses it. Like, it's like the choice between good and evil. I don't think free will is that. I think it's deliberate consciousness. You can use your free will in any direction you want, but you're going to use it within a spectrum of possibility and probability. Because you still have your DNA, okay? And sometimes there's life circumstances. Let's say there's an accident. You're not choosing the accident, but how you operate within the situation is up to you. You can bypass the fight and flight response and become deliberate. That's people who are trained to deal with emergencies have trained themselves to move beyond the fight and flight, right? And how to take action, right? And how to slow it down and how to meet the moment. So I think free will and fate are intertwined. In fact, I'll argue we were fated to have free will, right? But there's a lot of deconstruction that has to happen in order to do that. A lot of times we think we're exercising our free will when we do things according to our social cultural programming, right? But it's still not as deliberate as if we deconstruct to say, is that something I really want to do? If the answer is yes, you're still making a deliberate choice. But let's say you're in a shitty marriage, but you were raised to believe that it's a bad thing to get divorced, and you decide to stay, because it's not always exercising all of your free will. If you're only doing it because you believe, because of how you were raised, that that's the best thing to do, right? Ask me how I know. I've been there, right? And then I had to say, but is it really true? Just because that's the social and cultural norm or belief I was raised in. And yet I'm depleted and I'm feeling sick and my physical body is impacted and my mental health is impacted, then maybe I need to make a different choice, even if it's uncomfortable, because sometimes exercising our free will is uncomfortable, right? So the whole article is in the Awake Space Astrology magazine for $15 members and up. And if you're not in that, you can just get it in the shop. If you want to save the iOS surcharge, you can just get it on the web browser from your computer. Okay, that's one way you can download it. If you buy it on your phone and it's an iOS, there's like a surcharge. So I try to save people some bucks on that. I'll just link directly the magazine here in the show notes. But those were really good questions. I'll see if there's one. But if you want to see, I also put up, I think it's a public post. It might not be, it just might be an all member post. So if you want to be a free member, you can go in and you can watch that TikTok I did on my Patreon as well. Okay. Somebody prefers to remain anonymous. I can't get a clear answer on this topic, and I'd just like to get your thoughts on this as somebody who has lived through and healed from CPTSD and is autistic. When is autistic-like behavior and traits traits the result of trauma? And when is it an autistic person who has had a lot of trauma? Can this be seen in a chart? I don't know why I'm so curious about this. Perhaps it's because I always felt like I was autistic and I'm looking for validation, even I know that doesn't change the work I need to do. Well, first of all, you can see anything in a chart because the chart reflects who you are. I will not publicly teach trauma markers because it's easily weaponized, and I find that people are still overly identified with trauma. I really like 5 years of my life back. And I was a little frustrated after I cleared zero clinical markers from PTSD and associated trauma disorders. Many years ago. And I cleared zero clinical. That's like a huge deal. This was like super official because I was diagnosed at the beginning of working with a modality I created for myself, where I basically turned hypervigilance into hyper-awareness. It was an integrated model that I used because I had studied so many things and I was so tired. And it was like, fix me or don't fix me. But I knew the psychologist couldn't fix me. And that psychologist, who is no longer alive, sadly, because he was really old. He was 85 when I started working with him. He had his PhD from the University of Edinburgh. So it was no slouch. But yeah, so I had a pre-diagnosis, the original diagnosis. And then once I made significant progress and I was like, wait, I'm not reactive like I used to be, I did a secondary diagnosis. But over time, I wondered, I was like, well, I know I don't have PTSD, but why am I having some similar reactivity patterns, like wanting to withdraw, getting really quiet inside myself, needing to get away from people, not triggered. Nothing triggered me anymore, but I could still get really agitated in a crowd. And I knew I was safe. So why was I agitated? Why did certain sounds go right through my head? And it was only like 2 years ago before I was like, oh, autistic. Okay. And probably ADHD. I was like, oh, so I just had a sensitive nervous system to start with. Makes sense. That is also in the chart. To me, identifying, and I think for me, it was just nice to know that I'm not just the weird smart kid. I think that was great. But when is it trauma and when is it your wiring? Well, you can heal from trauma. And your wiring is specialized. And it's funny, I work with other energy workers and healers, and I'm very picky about who I allow to work on me because I always say I'm a Ferrari. And I said that long before I knew I was neurospicy. I'm a Ferrari, and I can't let somebody who only works on Toyotas and Volkswagens work on my system. So whether it's a chiropractor, somebody who does traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic, I have to be very, very careful about who I work with. In fact, one time back in the 90s, when I was first introduced to acupuncture, I went to the acupuncture clinic attached to my work. So I worked for a great not-for-profit that dealt with housing, and we had an acupuncture clinic attached to it. And all of the employees got acupuncture for free. That was one of our benefits. And I was introduced to it. I had horrible back spasms at the time due to stress. I just returned to the States and was a single mom, and just life kind of sucked. It was a rough time. And the first time I went in, I had immediate relief, and it was the guy who ran the clinic is why. So the next time I went in, I just went to the regular clinic, and because I didn't want to bother anybody, and they did a normal needling into my ankle, and I literally got fried. I literally just keeled over right there, and well, I didn't die, but I fainted. And that freaked people out, and they got me some orange juice, and then they got me into a treatment room, and a more advanced student came and worked on me, and my kundalini started rising. And I think some of that has to do with being neurodivergent, is we just have more sensitive wiring. And yeah, it shows up in the chart. It does. But I'm really, really careful about who and when I teach this to, just because I don't want it used as an excuse for lack of growth. And I'm not saying you do that. I'm just talking about it in general. And because people can really use this as a weapon. And I don't want to, I don't like seeing astrology weaponized. So with advanced students or people who are licensed to do certain things like psychologists, therapists, doctors, alternative medicine, or, like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda tends to lean towards Vedic, but I would teach that to them. But I think as just general knowledge, that's something I think needs to be gate kept a little bit. But to your answer, can we find it? Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with being autistic. The more I look at it and being neurospicy, whether it's ADHD or autism or whatever it is. And there's those who can care for themselves and those who have difficulty, right? But a lot of the stuff like poor executive function, let's put it that way. Our lives have been made to be so busy, so frenetic, so artificial. Is it really a problem to not be great at it when it's unnatural? Maybe. And I've not met many people who are completely normative. I think everybody kind of has their different expression. Like if I was really worried when my kids were little, especially as a parent having kids in the 90s, where almost every kid was diagnosed with something and drugged as small children to make them compliant, to make them quiet, to make them sit still for long periods of time. And I wonder what the result is today of so many children who were still developing, who were still growing, their systems were growing, their brain was developing. And I look at that and I'm not against medication. I want you to understand that. I think if somebody needs it and it helps them function, great. But to me, as a young parent of young children, what I saw was a lot of people trying to make their children more pliant, more compliant. And schools were recommending it to get kids to sit in their seats. And I don't think we're designed to sit still. They started removing recess, which is vital for children's development. They started getting rid of music and art and PE and things that actually help kids burn energy off. And I wonder about the world today. Like when we look at people, I see a lot of young people, and this is no shade or blame, who don't laugh loud, who have a hard time expressing themselves. Even when I look at like TikTok dances, like they're very contained. This idea that it has to be a specific movement and it has to be in a certain thing. And there's a lot of precision there, but I don't see a lot of joyful movement. Even though there's a smile, it's not always a joyful smile. And I think we labeled exuberance as bad. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't know how I feel about that. I know I went all over the place with that answer, but I think it raises a lot of questions. And the looking for validation, I wouldn't use astrology. I would go for a diagnosis. I would go for a diagnosis. Astrology is not a diagnostic tool, certainly not for laymen. And an astrologer ethically cannot diagnose unless they are licensed in the field. Like if they're in the medical field and they're licensed, if they're a therapist and they're licensed, then if they have the ability to do diagnostics as per their license, then sure. But it is not a good idea ethically or legally to do that. So the answer is yes, we can see that. I studied that in depth in my younger years as an astrologer in my 30s, and we can see it. To me, it's not enough to see the trauma or the problem. It's better to see the healing route, and I like to focus on that. So, big hugs. Great question. So it's this kind of thing that I talk about in the Patron only podcasts and in the Q&As. Just giving you a sample of what patrons get. It's going to be a wild week. So take a breath. Maybe limit your caffeine or energy drinks this week. You might want to hydrate a little more. You want to make sure you get some electrolytes. Probably not a good idea to drink alcohol or imbibe into many consciousness altering, substances, because it may not calm you down or it might just make you paranoid this week. And you might be a little feisty. So I would go au natural and let your own brain chemistry do the work. And yeah, you can. Okay. Again, the breathing exercises, they're freaking magic. If you want to know more about how the brain functions, you can watch Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor's TEDx talk on TikTok from 2013 called The Neuroanatomy of the Teenage Brain. But it's not just about teenagers. It talks about the brain development up till about 25 years of age. But that is where we learn about moving those hormones through the body in 90 seconds. And it's a fascinating watch. It'll help make sense of you. And if you're a parent of a teenager, it'll certainly make sense of them. And it's a video I often recommend because it just provided me a lot of ahas when it came out all those years ago. All right, guys, I'm going to love you and leave you. Have a great week. Check out the show notes. Head over to Patreon to see what's going on. We've got Matilda and my event up in the shop, and it's available now for purchase. I'm Laurie Rivers. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.